Now, I've made my share of mistakes just like anybody else has done. Today we're going to talk about the worst, most expensive mistakes I've ever made and how to easily avoid them. You know, there's common mistakes that most resellers I know have made, and if you're aware of them ahead of time, you can avoid them and not have to pay the drastic price that we've paid in the past, as well as many, many other people. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to talk about some of the biggest, most expensive mistakes that we've ever made in our lives as resellers. Mistakes that cost us a ton of money and a ton of aggravation in other aspects as well. Could have cost us our accounts for selling certain types of merchandise and things like that. But mostly these are money-related issues we'll discuss today. How to avoid it, how to save yourself, especially in the pocketbook. Now, when we first started, obviously we looked up anything we could on eBay before we purchased it if we had no clue. Before that, you pretty much didn't have cell phones, so you had to have an eye or know specifically what you're buying to be able to shell out the money to purchase it. Once eBay's around, then, you know, obviously we're looking it up just like everybody else once we have a phone and the whole works. The biggest thing to think about when you're looking up anything on eBay before we go any farther is there's only so many people on this planet that want to buy a certain type of item. That number may be 1,000, it may be 2, it may be one single person that would want a specific item that you're trying to sell. There may also only be 1 or 2 sales of an item on eBay totally, looking through Terapeak for the last 3 years. And that's not enough to be judging on sinking hundreds of dollars into an item that there's no other history on. In the past, if we saw that something sold on eBay, we took that for granted that was the case and we should be just fine. We've sunk in a ton of money into some items years back when we first started, and it got us nowhere. It cost us dearly, hundreds of dollars. And this is when we were reselling basically paycheck to paycheck, week to week, just to get by. And, you know, that kind of money is enough to sink you completely, where you can't buy any more merchandise and all sorts of other issues. You obviously have to pay for food and all the other things that come first, kids if you've got kids and the whole works, or whatever, your loved ones, whatever the case may be. And we've done that mistake several times. You know, you just assume, or even if you see 2, 3, 4 of something, the same thing can be true, because there may only be 4 people on this globe that want some rare, odd, unique item. That may sound strange or odd, but that's the case in many times. Now, we do a ton of vintage and collectibles, mostly oddball, vintage, rare items, or at least scarce, where most other people may not be able to get them anywhere else but from us. Sometimes I've been lucky enough to run into big lots of the exact same item, vintage, unique item. A good example is from the movie The Shawshank Redemption. Now, that was filmed at a place here in Ohio, a real prison, and that prison is a museum now. I found out in the wild some uniform buttons from that prison, original ones from, you know, the turn of the century, 1890s, maybe 1900 at the latest, I think, date-wise. I found a bunch of them. Best way to do better on stuff like that is to only list one at a time, and don't show that there's a ton of them available. List one, it sells, list another one. And that's what we've done for years with stuff like this. I think we got like 29 or 30 of these buttons. Really nice, basically prison, Ohio, reformatory buttons. Really from the original place where they filmed the movie The Shawshank Redemption. That's the prison there. We ended up selling some. We ended up selling some to a person who actually works at the museum, so our buttons were actually visible in the museum. It's a rarity. I knew there would be some decent money involved in them. But after we sold 4, 5, 6, 7, the price drops. It drops again when you've sold 8, 9, maybe 10. And then it drops way, way down after that. So we still have a bunch of them left. Now, we've made our money back. Because we were very thrifty when we purchased it. It was purchased in a massive, big bulk purchase, our best purchase of our life. We invested like $15,000 back at the time when we purchased all of these. But Anyway, the point being, if I would have just seen these out in the wild, it wasn't a bulk purchase, I would have sunk and went deep into these, and that would have blown a ton of money because there's only so many people that want certain items. And with buttons from the Shawshank Redemption, the prison from the movie, you know, shown in the movie, it's 14, 15, I think, is what we ended up with. I still have some available, but point being, the price is way, way down. Because, you know, no one's really interested. Maybe I could sell them all if I blew them down to 9 or 10 bucks, but, you know, if you spent 10, 15, 20 bucks a piece on something you figure you're going to get 75, 50 bucks at least out of, you know, and you can only sell so many of them, you're kind of blowing the whole deal on that right off the bat. Just like I said earlier, if you're looking on eBay and you only see 1, 2, 3 of something on Terapeak, which again is for 3 years of history. So in the last 3 years, there may be 3 total that show up of an item that's sold. No active listings on eBay whatsoever, nothing other than the sold listings. You see 3, most people say, hey, look, they're in the same price range. Let's say it's a $200 item. You got a chance to buy it for 75, 100 bucks, double your money, quick money you're thinking, especially if you don't look and check out when they sold. How quickly were they listed? How quickly did they sell? And that sort of thing as well. Those all come into play when you're talking about only a couple of sales histories to go on, when you could invest sometimes hundreds, sometimes $1,000. I personally know people invested $1,000 based on just a couple sales on eBay and ended up having to lose about $800 of it because the items had nobody else that was interested in it. It was in their inventory for a year and a half, and they couldn't afford to have it sitting there anymore. They just took it, they lost a ton of money. And that's happened many, many times to many, many people. So I don't judge by 1 or 2 or even 3 high prices. Just like when you find an item, you're looking up on eBay and you see 30 of them that sold for 25 bucks and you see 2 that sold for 100 bucks. There's either something really, really rare about the other ones, the version of variant or something, or it was a fluke, it was the only one up at that specific time, which sometimes is a little hard to tell, but that's usually what I see is the case when you're able to. And, you know, it's just some oddball outlier, and I don't trust the outliers. If I've got 25 that say it's worth 25 bucks and I've got 2 that say it's worth 100 bucks, I'm gonna skirt on the side of safety and say it's only worth 25 bucks and only purchase it if it's okay to make a profit at a $25 selling price. If it's for sale for 20 bucks and I only can get 25 bucks for it, I'm not gonna buy it. I don't know, even if it was 10 bucks, if it would be worth my time at the end of the day, because you got to take out fees and taxes and stuff. So you may make 8 or 9 bucks. To me, that's just not worth it. I mean, I do sell things that cheap that have been up for a long time, where if somebody buys a bunch of items all at the same time, but I try to never list anything unless I list it for a start price or can list it for a start price of $19.99. Now, I'm going to give you another example here. This is one that could have shut us down on the spot. We did get a warning. I did get a suspension for this one. It was something I thought was completely legit. It was tested. It was a gold item as well. Now, 15 years ago or so, we ran into a Chanel 14 karat gold pen. It was a pen set, pen and pencil. It was marked 14 karat. It had emblazoned on the side what looked to be enamel, Chanel, and it had a number. It looked like an advertising piece or promotional item for some of their perfume. They were vintage pens. The maker was legit. We had it tested. The metal was 14 karat gold. I know there's a bunch out there that are plated, but this has got like a sleeve of gold. It's not a huge amount. It's like buying a nice high level of gold filling glasses, eyeglasses or something. It's like that kind of gold. It's not like some fortune, but back then gold was a lot of money. 2000, I don't know what it is right now. I haven't checked it in a month or so, but gold was really high. So we were out in the wild. We saw, I don't know, a half a dozen, maybe more on eBay, a couple that were still active. Didn't think much of it, thought, you know, that's not a lot up. Terapeak wasn't there. You had to use eBay's completed listings, and I think back then you could only look at a year's worth and only see the details of the last 3 months. Something like that, if I'm not mistaken. eBay's changed how the searches are. They're much better now. You didn't used to have multiple years of data, so I applaud eBay for that without a doubt. But everything checked out from our mind on it. There was no information stating it was fake. We did all the searches we could before we listed it. It was gold. Why would somebody have spent the time and money to do gold and the whole works? We shelled out the money for it. It was hundreds of dollars. This is one of those double whammy mistakes right off the bat. It was well over what the scrap value was by like 4 or 5 times. It was some horrendous amount because of what the prices were for 6, 8 of them that had sold on eBay and what the list prices were for, I think, 2, as I said, that were active at the time. But we got a cease and desist notice and a takedown and a suspension immediately that evening after we listed it. Turns out they were counterfeit. Chanel themselves sent us a nasty notice. And again, they didn't have to prove that they were fake, but I would say that they wouldn't put that out there if they weren't. 5 years later, we found stories about these exact same pens. So it was a common thing that they did this back in the day because they could take the value of gold, which wasn't a ton, and add Chanel to it, which the name itself raised the value like 3 or 4 times what the value of the gold was. So it was basically a scam. Someone turned gold, real gold, and everybody thought what I thought, I'm assuming too, that at this point, who would fake real gold and all this other stuff? So at the end of the day, we got a multi-day suspension. I don't remember the whole story on it. I think they released it a day early out of courtesy since it was our first offense of anything, but it was enough to warrant that, apparently at that day and age on eBay. We couldn't sell it as Chanel. I couldn't even put it on eBay without risking it again, even if I didn't put the word Chanel in the listing. So what I did at the end of the day is I scrapped it for scrap gold. I got the scrap value of it. We lost like 4 times what we got back out of it because we based our purchase price on it on what they were selling for. And even though they sold on eBay, and this still can happen, even though they sold on eBay, it doesn't mean that the person who sold them didn't get in trouble. It doesn't mean that they weren't paid for back in those days and age of eBay. Again, this was 10, 15 years ago or maybe somewhere in that range. So you got to be cautious. You might see stuff on eBay like perfumes, opened perfumes that have good prices on them, but technically by eBay's own policy, it still states it's in there, you can't sell them. There's issues on contamination and things like that. Somebody could have messed with it, somebody could die, they could be allergic to something, there could be, a plot, a ploy, who knows? I'm just telling you what the rules are. Take it as you wish, but I always warn everybody not to mess with them. I used to sell perfume bottles and things with perfume in them, so, I'm fully with those folks who still want to be able to sell them. I just don't sell them because it's not worth the risk. Somebody could get hurt, whatever. It might not be the exact perfume in there and it could have something tainted. So I'm always cautious about that. So, you got to take all these things into account. If you sell on Amazon, you got to worry about making sure you're able to list it before you buy something. It might be a gated item that you don't have permission to sell. And don't check a similar item. It has to be that exact item. You have to get it through the listing process. If you can't list it, don't buy it. And there's items you can't sell on eBay anymore these days either. If you're not paying attention, you may buy something thinking it's scarce as can be, and there's none on eBay now, I'm going to make a fortune, but the reason there aren't any on eBay is because you can't list them. Nowadays, they can block you from listing certain words in a title to at least acknowledge, hey, you better watch out what you're listing. At least they warn you these days. Didn't used to do that, but again, those are the types of issues that can cost you not only your business, but a ton of money. And we've made those mistakes multiple times in various different ways. We learn from those mistakes and have never made that same mistake twice. Obviously, we've made similar mistakes here and there back in those days, but it's been over a decade of, being able to completely avoid these sorts of issues. Now, these days, though, we do not take eBay's sold listing results as gold. You can't always count on those to be what you are going to get out of the item. They may have sold for that price, 1 or 2, but there may be no one else on this planet that would want those items for that type of money. Some of the things we've sold, like little tiny photos and things for $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, there's only a handful of people that would have purchased those from us, and we knew that. Some of the early baseball cards we just sold, $750, close to $1,000. There's only a couple people around that are going to even know what those early of a card is and want to spend close to $1,000 on something like that. It's not in the know these days. They're not famous and popular now. You've really got to be into that sort of thing to want to spend that kind of money on it. So you've got to be really careful to know where the limit is. Don't take them for granted every time you look and there's one or two and it shows it's sold. Sometimes even more than that. 6, 8 with the Chanel pens. You know, look somewhere else as well. There's other sites, Etsy and things like that too. Look on Amazon. If they're books, it's tons of places you can look for book prices. But the bottom line here is don't judge your purchasing power on just a handful of listings that have sold over a 3-year time span. That's a huge mistake that can cost you in multiple ways. It's cost us, it's cost the majority of all resellers that I've known for the last 20 plus years. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gives you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Atari brings the computer age home.
Gotta run, gotta go!
Late again, huh, Dad?
With an Atari home computer,
Have a nice day at the office.
you can easily work at home or open your home to a world of possibilities. In fact, the hardest part about owning an Atari home computer isn't how to use it, but who gets to use it.
Lock it closed, Dad. Mind if I do my work?
Hey, no problem.
Atari home computers, we brought the computer age home.